Hello and welcome back to Premier Injuries, where once again we're talking about the Euros. Just before we get into it, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We've got so much good content coming out. Not just Euros content as well. Ben, we've got a big interview that's come out actually today as we're recording this. A huge one.
He was head of medical at Wolves and he was head of performance at LA Galaxy. Fantastic interview. Phil goes into great detail, takes a look behind the curtain, as it were, of what it's like to work within a Premier League club. There's loads of great information in there and lots of things that he talked about for the first time. I really advise you, of course, to tune in and listen and watch, and by all means, add a few comments in there.
Yeah, it's a really special exclusive interview because Phil hasn't actually talked like this to anybody else. This is Premier Injuries just for you. But as well, before we get into it, I have to give you a clap, Ben. A lot of the community will be looking up to you. You made some big, bold, massive balls on display. You didn't show them on screen, but you can. But in terms of your ballsy kind of descriptions, you called it with the Czechs. We called it kind of with France, Switzerland. We said it would be a difficult game. You thought that the France would win. I thought France would win, but we said it would be a tighter affair than a lot of people. So we had some massive shouts going into this round of 16, and maybe when we discuss these quarterfinals as well. So I just thought I'd give you a clap there. And as well, we started last week's discussions with this, but I'm just going to talk people through really quickly before we get into the fun of the actual discussions of the assets that we'll be looking at for this quarterfinal. Make sure to manage your transfers really well in these final few weeks of the competition, because in terms of Euro Fantasy, before these quarterfinals, you've got 3 free transfers, and then any more than that, you take a hit. Before the semi-finals, you've got 5, and then before the final, you've got 5. But if you do have a wild card, you obviously have unlimited. But with Fan Team, this is the one that I think a lot of people might be caught out on. You've only got 3 free transfers again, and 3 more before the semi-finals. But before the final, after the semi-final, no more transfers. That is your team. You stick with it. Whoever you've captained, whoever you've played in your first 11, that is your team. So just remember to be very careful with your picks and punts going into that semi-final. You really have to pick the teams that you think are going to do well and get to the final, and also probably win the whole damn thing. But yeah, let's go through the fixtures. We've got these quarterfinals to look at. I'm going to be looking at it from a kind of odds perspective, but let's go through each one. And I'm going to give it through the list of kind of disparity, I think, in terms of the quality between the two teams. And coming up at the top, it's England versus Ukraine. 80% chance that England will win, 20% chance of Ukraine. Do you agree with that, Ben? Do you see England kind of going through?
Yes, they should get past the Ukraine comfortably. I do like that Ukrainian side. They're very fortunate to get through against the Swedes. I thought for the large part they were the much better team. Yes, Ukraine hit the post, but so did Sweden. Forsberg himself hit it twice, and then they had that sending off Danielson, and just the manner of their victory in time added on, in extra time. There was a few tired legs out there. They're going to have slightly less recovery, and also they've played those additional minutes. And you would expect, certainly, on the form of what they've shown in this tournament, for England to ease past the Ukraine.
Yeah, and looking at the kind of game there, we will go into individual players and everything, but I think England do have a really good chance of a clean sheet as well, so I'll probably have quite a few of their assets for the clean sheets. England have just done really well. A lot of people have been negative and critical of the way Southgate has set up, but it does give you assurances for Fan Team that you can have maybe Pickford in goal, maybe a Stones or a Maguire as an asset. And I would like to have Trippier as well. We'll get onto that a little bit, but I'm not sure if he's 100% starting. In terms of Ukraine assets, probably I won't have any at all. then looking at this, interestingly as well, the bookmakers have Spain as the second most likely team to reach the final, ahead of Italy. Now, I'll probably be going against that, which is kind of rare for me, but I'll be going against the data in that sense, because I think that Spain have really exposed themselves as poor at the back. Now, the next game against Switzerland, I think, again, it's going to be a bit like the French game. It's going to be a lot tighter than I think a lot of the bettors give credit for. I think a lot of the community does, because there's a 72% chance in terms of odds and everything put together that Spain will win. But looking at their defence, they were pretty appalling. And then I've got some other data that we'll focus on in a little bit, but the data kind of proves it as well. However, I do think they'll have just enough to get through the game against Switzerland, but it is going to be a tight one. And I think both teams will score, so I'm going to avoid defensive assets, and I'll probably have a few Spanish and maybe some Swiss attacking assets. I don't know if you kind of agree with that, Ben.
The Spanish assets, I think I went... I was looking at Olmo maybe in the last round, but wasn't sure whether he'd start. So they went with Sarabia, and that was, I think you sort of picked up on that, and he wasn't nailed down as a guaranteed starter maybe early on in the tournaments, but really came to the fore in match day 3, and that form continued through. And so I do like him. The obvious pick is Morata in there, but I'm just not confident that he can go out and deliver. If I'm looking at any Spanish assets from that attacking sense, it would come from midfield as opposed to maybe that front line Morata or Moreno. But look, they seem to be gaining a little bit momentum. They've got that confidence is beginning to build. Obviously, with Busquets in there, they look a lot more stable and comfortable, and they've got that pivot where they can build on those attacks. And you never know if Morata was to suddenly, if he can kick on from that goal that he got in extra time, then they're a real threat. You've got those question marks at the back. Luis Enrique, changed things up. And last time out, I think Alba being one of those ones dropping down to the bench was a big surprise, and that hurt a lot in the fantasy community. So he's not afraid to change things up, keep the opposition managers guessing. Not great for us from a fantasy perspective, but I quite like the Spanish. In the Swiss, look, I think they look to me, I expected France to go through comfortably, if the truth be known. And when it was 3-1, I thought it was job done, game over. But credit where it's due. They didn't give up, and they kept pushing. But I'm still not convinced. It almost, it's 3-1 down going into the last sort of 10 or so minutes. You've got nothing to lose, so you throw everything up there. It's, it's the knockout phase of the competition. I think Spain could pick them apart quite easily. Although, we've been surprised on many times in this tournament already. So I may wait a little bit nearer to kick off to decide on assets from that Swiss perspective, and see if I can warm to any in particular nearer kickoff.
Well, this is a point that I was going to come to later, but it's very good actually that you raised that, Ben, with that Spain game, because it's the first one of that matched week or game day or whatever the hell they call it. You can kind of mess around with your assets going into that, because you'll know the team early, in the sense before it actually kicks off, so you can do it before the deadline closes. So if Alba was dropped once again, which really annoyed me, I was one of those people that you mentioned there, had him in my team. So if that was to happen, then at least you've kind of got that bit of protection. If Ferran Torres is on the bench once again, then maybe you want to start with somebody else in the team. That there is that ability there. That's probably one of the highlights of that fixture, that it gives you that little bit of leeway. Let's move on to the next fixture, and I was again a little bit surprised at how much the bookmakers have Denmark ahead of the Czech Republic. They're putting it at 62% likelihood that Denmark will win, and the Czechs 38%. We both actually been waxing lyrical about the Czechs through the tournament. We said that they'd be the second best group with England. We thought that they'd actually put up a good fight, and they did. They've been excellent. But Denmark, as stated there, have a higher probability of winning. They seem to have a high probability of clean sheet, much more favoured to progress. It's such a difficult game to call, though, so I'm not sure which assets I should go with. The only one that really jumps out at me is Mile. Again, somebody that we've been really keen on through the tournament. There is the chance of the clean sheet, but there's also, he has that ability because he bombs forward. He's basically a left winger, and so he's almost a bit out of position. He seems to be the only one that I would risk it on in that game. But I don't know, are you a bit braver than me, Ben?
This is a really tough call. This is a coin toss for me. While in round 16, I did fancy the Czech and I did fancy Denmark, both to progress, which they have done. In this one, there's a little bit of local rivalry, from the same neck of the woods. If I was pushed and if I was asked to hang my hat on a team, I would probably just come down on the side of the Danes, and the reason being not necessarily from a quality perspective, because I think that they're two very, very evenly matched. I just think that wave of momentum, they're coming off two great results. I think it's 5-0 and 4-0, so they've got that, and this wave of enthusiasm, mentioned it last time out, everybody is willing and wanting the Danes to do well, after what happened in match day 1 with Christian Eriksen. And there's almost that inner belief to want to go out there and squeeze every little bit of energy and push till the very, very last minute of every game. And I think that might just be enough to take the Danes through and past the Czech Republic.
And when I've watched the Danish team as well, they've just been really nice on the eye. We kind of talked there about England not being attractive in their style, but Denmark are almost the opposite. And maybe this is what has cost them in the tournament a little bit, is they've been really beautiful, kind of, especially against Wales, back-to-back 4-0 wins, really impressive stuff. My only concern with Denmark is they obviously got back-to-back 4-0 wins, but who were they playing? And I think the Czechs are a lot better than Wales and Russia. And in the other games of the tournament, Denmark have underperformed their goals. They've underperformed XG conceded and XG going forward. And so there are those question marks in my head. But then there's obviously the other side of the argument is maybe they were affected in those first couple of games. They were really, really unlucky against Belgium in terms of all the data there. And so maybe they've kind of got the shackles off and they are playing to their maximum capacity. So it'll be really interesting to see the outcome of that game. But for me, it's just a little bit too rich to kind of gamble too much, apart from maybe a Mile and maybe one other asset who might be involved there. The final game is obviously Italy versus Belgium. This one is really kind of close in terms of betting and things like that, in terms of odds. 56% chance Italy, Belgium 44%. But for me, I think the injuries in the Belgium side, the quality of football that Belgium have actually played, says that really this is Italy's game. I don't really see Belgium causing them too much problem. Again, I think this is almost a situation where we're seeing it as a really, really tight game. But in terms of XG, Belgium have been outperformed, as mentioned, by Denmark. In terms of the Portugal game, they were outperformed in terms of XG. And so they've really been limited in terms of going forward. They were super lucky that their only shot on target in that whole game against Portugal went into the back of the net. And so I'm not too sure on Belgium, and so I'm going to load up on quite a few Italian assets. I will say that there probably won't be a lot of goals for Italy, but I don't think that Belgium will score. I think that they're an assured kind of clean sheet, but maybe I'm gambling too much on Italy. Obviously, I have a massive soft spot for them since the start of the tournament. Don't know what your thoughts and feelings are, Ben.
Oh wow. I mean, I do like Italy, and I mentioned going into round 16 that I maybe didn't think Italy were as good as everybody, to put them up there on that pedestal. Um, I said it would be a difficult game against the Austrians, and it turned out to be that way. I know they've got this national record now and this long unbeaten run. And yes, the loss of De Bruyne and Hazard to an extent. I mean, any involvement from Eden Hazard in this tournament has been a bit of a bonus, given his patchy sort of injury record since he went to Real Madrid. I mean, I had a bit of a chat earlier in the week about this, and Eden Hazard was always playing catch up to get into this tournament. I think throughout his Chelsea career, he averaged over 2,700 minutes in the league every season. Since his arrival at Real Madrid in the Bernabeu, we're talking just over 800 minutes. So, in terms of getting out there and playing the minutes and playing at a level that we know he can do, was always going to be a risk, and it would take something special. So I don't necessarily think the loss of Hazard is huge. Maybe De Bruyne, yeah, that's a different story. But for me, and knowing that everybody will want to be loading up on Italy, the Insignias, the Spinazzolas, the Immobile, that is pushing me the other way to go with Belgium. I think it is a really tough game. And when I'm seeing a game that for me could be a 50-50 shout, then I'll go with the underdog, because the ceiling, the upside of those getting through and not taking a hit, particularly for fan team, appeals to me more.
I see it's the sensible way to play it, and it's almost a little bit annoying that we're constrained by transfers and everything, but that's the way you got to play this game. In terms of it though, I mean, does it not worry you that kind of looking at Belgium, they've got about half the amount of XG, way less shots inside the box, way less big chances created, or does that not matter too much to you? Do you think that Belgium have got that quality to see the fixture over the line?
There's only one stat that I'm bothered about, and that's the goals for column and the goals against column when that final whistle blows. Anything else really is meaningless. And with Belgium, yeah, they mightn't be firing on all cylinders, but in certain individuals, Lukaku, for example, you've got match winners in there as well. So you can never discount them. It doesn't matter how bad a team could be playing. It's almost, the Ronaldos with the Portugals. These players can single-handedly drag their teammates through. And by the way, Belgium have more than Lukaku in their ranks. So I think it's a really, really tough call. Italy, yes, have looked great, pleasing on the eye, deserve all of the plaudits. For me, I will have a better understanding of where Italy sit after this game, because at this minute, I don't think they've played anybody of any real caliber, real sort of premium top class team. Belgium will be that test for them. So we will see how that pans out.
Yeah, and I suppose Belgium have played a premium, brilliant Portugal, so they've almost passed that test already. And in terms of it as well, this might be a game that is won on defences, because Belgium and Italy have been fantastic at the back. They've both only let in one goal. In terms of XG conceded, it's kind of similar, and they both have 3 clean sheets apiece each. So, in terms of big chances conceded as well, Italy 3, Belgium 2. This is where they've almost, worked the most on with these teams. So we talked about the fixtures. We will get onto the individual players, but we need to know who is fit, who is healthy, who is going to be in and around these teams. So let's talk about key injuries. We've already mentioned KDB and Hazard there. Are those two out of the tournament though, or just out of this single game?
At the moment, they're certainly still involved and will remain with the squad. When you look at the two injuries in isolations, you would certainly say Kevin De Bruyne has a better chance of returning ahead of Eden Hazard. I think Thibaut Courtois come out and said it would be a miracle for Eden Hazard to come back and recover from a hamstring problem. At the time of recording, which is Wednesday, both players are still training individually, so they're away from the group doing some stuff in the gym. Roberto Martinez was a little bit more optimistic and the possibility of when they could return if they progress, of course. And he hasn't ruled him out of a place in the squad for the semi-final. So we'll wait and see how that one works. But like I say, I think De Bruyne would be the player that you could, you would certainly put ahead of Eden Hazard. And if Hazard, even if it's a minor strain, we're talking 10 to 14 days, and he just doesn't have that the minutes in his legs from the last 2 seasons, and he'll just not have that, just not fortunate enough to be able to the time to recover and turn around, certainly to start maybe for the semis or the final if Belgium were to get there.
Moving it on to Denmark, Vass and Poulsen are the worries there. Vass didn't start the game. Poulsen was involved, but afterwards there's kind of been injury concerns. Any news on either of them?
Vass was illness related, so that was more of a precautionary measure, and that was the reason for his sort of the question marks and doubts over him. Poulsen, that was a minor injury, so again, certainly nothing which would potentially end his tournament. So Poulsen would be a player that we would expect to return in the quarter-final tie.
Moving it on to Italy, Florenzi and Chiellini are the big ones that I think a lot of people are worried about there. Will they be returning to the back line?
It certainly doesn't look like Florenzi's going to be returning, particularly for this one. There had been, he came into the tournament with a slight calf issue, then picked it up, I think it was in match day 1, and it hasn't been right since. So this is an ongoing calf complaint that he just can't get it right. And the difficulty is when we're talking about football in particular, these high intensity runs and quick changes of direction, a lot of load going through that calf. So it's not an injury, particularly like the hamstring, that you can just maybe disregard or try to run off. It's one that really does need to be managed carefully. Otherwise, it could potentially rule him out for the start of the next domestic season. With Chiellini, hamstring, again, that was more of a precautionary withdrawal, and he did train ahead of the round 16, so he was involved with the group. I think it was just a case of Roberto Mancini err on the side of caution with that one and ensuring that, he is, because hamstring injuries have such high recurrence and re-injury rates, again, there's no need to be taking any risks. I mean, Chiellini himself would be the guy that's telling the medical department, I am fit or I'm not fit, or I can't do this or I can't. He's been there, he's done it, he's got several T-shirts. So it will come down, that decision will be completely player-led with Chiellini, but he stands a very good chance of returning to the squad.
Now, you've mentioned it already, but was Jordi Alba's dropping purely tactical?
Yeah, certainly not aware of any issues with regards to Jordi Alba. Luis Enrique came out and he said, look, I've got 24 players, all of whom could play in that starting 11. I'm not afraid to change things up. I'm not afraid to put them in. And I don't believe by bringing anybody into that squad that I'm going to weaken any position. And maybe that decision, although you never know, you never 100% know what's happening behind the scenes, what discussions are taking place, how players are training. But, if he's to be believed, then it was purely just a tactical decision. And yeah, look, fortunately, it worked out okay for the Spanish, and Jordi Alba gets his opportunity, hopefully, to maybe play in the quarterfinal or beyond.
And one of the final ones is Yarmolenko. I mean, we said that we're not too sure if they will do well against England, but if you do want to take a punt on a Ukrainian attacker, Yarmolenko seems to be one of the key ones. Is he going to be returning for that all-important England game?
Yeah, look, should be absolutely fine. There's obviously a lot of fatigue. There's a lot of tired legs out there for the Ukrainians. We know that Yarmolenko has been suffering over the last couple of seasons. Ruptured his Achilles down at West Ham, then finished the season with a little bit of a knee issue. So it's comes as no surprise that these players are just feeling the pace of the game. When you're entering those 115, 120 minutes down the line. Of course, he's a player that covers a huge amount of ground. He's one of the Ukrainian talisman. He's going for national goal scoring records. I think he's got Shevchenko's target in his sight. So he's big, and there will be nothing that will keep him out of this tie. I'm almost certain of that.
So are there any other injury concerns or worries that people should have, or should we go into analysing defenders, midfielders and attackers that we like?
Nothing certainly in terms of high profile that we're aware of at this period of time. What I would say is, there's been a lot of players who will be resting typically 24 to 48 hours post-match. And then as you gradually get closer to kick-off, that's when we start to see players on the training pitches. Don't be too concerned about maybe players training away from the main group. Don't get too worried. There's a lot of players just working on individual programs, and that will be in conjunction and agreement with the players and also the domestic clubs and the medical teams. So just because a player isn't, with the main bulk of the players doesn't necessarily mean that you have to think that the worst. They could certainly be involved.
So let's move it from potentially the worst to potentially the best with these defensive picks. Now, the ones that I'm going to go through, and then we'll get your kind of big choices, Ben. But first of all, Mile. I mentioned him already, but I think that Denmark here, as I've kind of explained here, he's got such an attractive potential about him because it's not just the clean sheet. I mean, I do think that the Czechs have a high likelihood of scoring just because of the way that they play. They're so good at set pieces. They're good at exploiting other teams for their gain in terms of their play style. They're so good at it. But Mile, he's so attacking. In his last game, he had a 0.4 XG, but over the whole of the tournament, he has the highest XGI of any defender. He has the most shots in the box of any defender, most total shots, shots on target, all of defensive players. So I think that he is a really, really attractive asset, especially at his price point. It enables you maybe to put money elsewhere, and you can play him and not worry too much that, yes, maybe he might get a blank, but there's such a high possibility in this game where Denmark are going to go for it, the Czechs are going to go for it, and he's the type of player that can capitalise on a mistake, and maybe there might be a clean sheet in there for Denmark as well. I mean, do you like him for that fixture, Ben?
Like him, got him, 4.7 million in fan team. What's not to like? He's been, I think we discussed it from, way back in the pre-tournament podcast as a player who was certainly on our radar, and he's been involved since match day one. So they've got absolutely no concerns or worries or any reason why I would remove him from his squad at this point. So yeah, I agree with you there, Jay.
The next one is Spinazzola. I think with Spinazzola, it's almost Spinazzola and who else? I've kind of talked through already that I think Belgium have been quite lucky in terms of the goals that they scored. They do have 8, but only an XG of 4.09. In terms of it, obviously, that comes down to the quality of the players. Lukaku, Hazard, even Thorgan Hazard, not just Eden. These are really, really brilliant players. And De Bruyne himself scored with, kind of a half chance. But the fact that a couple of these players aren't in there gives me kind of confidence to maybe go and load up a little bit more on that Italian defence. So I'm not sure if you should get an extra one in there. Spinazzola, I like Donnarumma again, and he might be kept a little bit more busy in this game if Belgium do take more speculative shots. But the problem with Belgium is that they don't really do that. They don't press. So in terms of teams, Belgium sit in the bottom 5 for pressing in this tournament so far. And I just think that Spinazzola can do really well in exploiting the kind of differing styles and systems that Belgium and Italy will be deploying. Italy will be front foot pressing from the start. He's going to be up there attacking quite often, putting balls into the box, but maybe getting a few shots as well. And this is the thing with Fan Team over the Fantasy Euros. He'll get rewarded, Spinazzola, just for taking shots, and he does love to take them as well. And in terms of the way that Italy are playing, I just think that this is going to cause Belgium a lot of problems. And I think that their sit-off approach as well might assure the clean sheet. But would you treble up on Italian defensive assets? I mean, is it Spinazzola and that, or would you throw in Donnarumma and somebody else as well?
Spinazzola, yeah, look, he's got to be the guy. There's always one or two players that really step up and shine on the big stage. I think Spinazzola is one of those. He's got 2 UEFA Man of the Match awards under his belt already. I tell you what, if he gets another one, he mightn't be far away from that player of the tournament, depending on, if Italy can progress, and fully deserving of it, by the way. Absolutely rapid. 33.8 kilometers per hour he's been clocked at. So that's joint fastest in the tournament. So he's an absolute speedster. And he's got an end product with it as well, which is always good. Would I double up? I don't think I would double up necessarily defensively. Bonucci, he's the only other player that I might see is locked in. But certainly I've got Donnarumma in my squad. I did tinker with rotating Donnarumma and Simon in the round 16 games, just because I wanted to change it up a little bit. But I think, I will be sticking with those 2 players as we progress. And with us sort of just having that little inkling that Belgium will go through, I will just happily, probably stick with those 2 Italians, to be honest. I'm not sure. I'll have to think about it. If I cool on Belgium and I sway more towards Italy, but these players are going to have high ownership, and I'm talking about fan team in particular. And when we're looking about the limited number of free transfers, I'm thinking, if you own them, great, and then bang, you in the wave, you've got that momentum with everybody. But if they don't, and you've went against them, that's when you'll see your rank rise massively. And that happened with me in round 16. I think one of my teams went from 10,000 up to 2,000 now, and in a place where, again, I don't have to take any hits this round to have 11 starters for that, which could be huge when you think about, people are having to take huge point hits before a ball's kicked. I wouldn't be surprised if one of my teams was maybe up into the 16, 15, 1400s, just purely because people are having to take massive hits just to get 11 players out.
And this is why we're advising you again to just make sure to get the teams that you think are going to progress and go forward, because this will save you on transfers. This will save you kind of having to take any hits, because this is part of the game now. You have such limited transfers going forward, 3 in both of these rounds before the semi-final. And then that's it. You don't get any in the final in Fan Team. Fantasy Euro is a little bit different. They give you a little bit more leeway, but it's still really difficult, because if you gamble and get it wrong, then you've got half a team kind of missing. Moving on to England, I think Stones, Maguire, Pickford are great picks, but I think anything more than that, you're really risking it, because Southgate, it's not clear who's going to be starting each game week. I would love to have Trippier, though. I think he's been fantastic when he has played. He's on so many set pieces, and his ball delivery is pretty good. Obviously, England have been playing quite conservatively, and it hasn't allowed him to fully kind of prosper into that role. They might play with, I don't know, the breaks off in this game against Ukraine. They might be a little bit more positive, but in terms of the England players, I think a double up, maybe even a treble up is almost essential with England, because Stones and Maguire have a really good ability, with England's amazing ability on set pieces to score. And Pickford, I think, is just a safe kind of pick. We've gone with Donnarumma a little bit before, but England almost have a much even higher opportunity of clean sheets going forward, and they proved it. They're the only team now to have total clean sheets throughout the tournament. I mean, will you be trebling up on England going forward, Ben?
Treble up might be a little bit of a reach. I'm undecided. I've been with John Stones from match day 1. So very happy to,
or Hon Stoners, as I like to call.
Hon Stoners, yes. Consecutive a four bagger, as it were. Maguire possibly. Pickford, he's expensive, and he's an ex-Mackham. So am I going next to Pickford? Probably not. But for me as well, everybody's expecting this walkover. and I am expecting a win. But again, it's a complete different change in mentality for this English team. They've went into every game. I think the Croatian Open one, it was tough. They couldn't go either way. The Scottish, you knew what you were going to get. Against the Czech, they had already qualified. And like the Germans, again, could have went either way. Everybody now, so they've got this weight of expectation. Ukraine have got nothing to lose. They are massive underdogs. And you just wonder, how will that affect England, the players, and almost Gareth Southgate? Does he continue to sit and maybe play that more passive style, and play on the counter, and break the lines with the likes of Sterling? Or, do they suddenly change that philosophy and think, well, actually, we're going to be the dominant team and we're going to press and we're really going to take the game to the Ukraine? And yeah, look, there's a few questions to be asked there, and I'm a little bit uneasy with this, if the truth be known. Like I say, I don't think it'll be the ease of progression that a lot of people seem to think it will be.
Well, this is why when we go on to the midfielders and attackers, I'm not that keen on the England forwards. I mean, if Grealish was to start, I would love him in my team, but it's not assured. A lot of the things around England, I think clean sheets are quite, almost an assurance there. That they'll play a conservative style, but apart from that, it's all guesswork. Who's going to be in the 11? Who's going to be playing? Who's going to come off the bench and make an appearance as well? It really is up in the air. The final one, I've touched upon it. We won't go into it too much because we both kind of agreed. Defence of Spain is an avoid for me, and one of the huge data sets for me. So you look at the XG conceded in terms of the whole tournament so far, and they're like bottom half of the table. They're worse than the likes of Ukraine. They have kept 2 clean sheets. You could say that they're almost a bit lucky in terms of game management. They were hella boring in those games when they did do that, and it's kind of killing teams with 1,000 cuts in that sense, and it doesn't always work. And they do have fragilities. I said at the start of the tournament, their kryptonite is physical teams that are good at set pieces. Spain have worked on their own set pieces, but, dealing with physical teams hasn't kind of been worked on themselves. But the big bit of data for me that stands out is the XG conceded of the shots that they are facing. So in terms of non-penalty XG per shot conceded, they are actually bottom of all teams at the tournament with an average of 0.21 XG per shot conceded. That's worse than the likes of Macedonia, and that shows you the quality of chances that they're letting through. For me, that's a huge worry. That's, every 5 shots is basically a goal there. Yeah, I think the data kind of proves it as well. Spanish defence is a bit of an avoid going forward. I don't know, is that an overreaction, Ben?
No, you make some valid points, and it's solid in your research. For me, and I'm talking purely from a fan team perspective, I'll be looking to go into the quarterfinals without taking any hits whatsoever. So I'm limited in who I can actually bring in and who needs to stay. And for that to happen, then I'm already on Aymeric Laporte. I think of those Spanish defenders at his price point, 6 million, when you compare him to some of the others, when he offers that threat from set pieces, which we thought maybe would come to the fore when the Spanish, weren't firing on all cylinders and they weren't going a little bit more gung-ho. We thought that might become more important. So I'm in on Laporte, and I did go with Simon as well, and that was again with one eye on the Spanish that I thought would progress, and also in these limited transfers and the possibility of maybe rotating with Donnarumma, but we'll see. So those are the 2 I'm with defensively, but look, I share those concerns with you by all means, and won't you look to have them in my Euro fantasy team.
Yeah, so going forward, just to add to that, they have the 4th most big chances conceded in the tournament so far. Again, only teams like Wales, Croatia and Macedonia are worse than them. Let's go to the midfield though, and this might upset you a lot, Ben. Hasn't Raheem Sterling had a fantastic tournament? Okay. Well, I'm going to explain why he has had a good tournament. But yeah, what a fantastic reaction from you there, Ben. I'm glad you're in agreement. He has one of the best non-penalty XG per shots in terms of England. England have one of the best non-penalty XG per shots. But the problem is obviously that they take so few shots. Sterling himself is just behind Sarabia for the tournament in terms of XGI. He has a higher XG than the Spaniard, who we are both very keen on, Ben. And he seems to be one of the only kind of England players that can score, and he's at the centre of the attack. So kind of looking at that data, spoiler alert, I'm really not interested in Kane. Would you have Sterling in your team, or is that, is this offensive for me to even ask you that?
Look, he's pushing for player of the tournament. No question what he's brought to that England team. I think he's looked a threat. He's looked very dangerous, particularly when the eyes of the world were on Harry Kane. He's stepped up and he's delivered. Would I have him in my team? Certainly not. Just can't go there. In terms of England attacking assets,
out of principle.
Yeah, look, and again, this is just based on domestic form, particularly the second half of the season. Gareth Southgate will live and die by these decisions. So fair play if England go on and win this tournament, and in no small part due to the fact that Raheem Sterling has come when all and sundry had their opinions about the squad that he's picked and the players he's selected and started, hasten to add. So I'll be one of the first people to hold my hands up and say, well done. That's why you're in the role and that's why you get paid the big bucks. For me, England-wise, I'm maybe warming towards Harry Kane. Maybe. I just think that goal, I'm hoping that might be that shot in the arm. So he's maybe one that attracts interest. And I also think Jack Grealish, there's got to be a point where he says, Jack Grealish, you're in that team, and not just for this one game. You start, and if we win, you start, and if we win, you start. Because for me, he lifts that team. He creates a buzz, the supporters. He's got the tools just to be able to unlock the tightest defenses. He looks a threat to me, and I've been a big fan and champion Jack all season, and thought this could be his stage to go on and shine. And I think Gareth Southgate needs to give him that. He needs to provide this and give him the opportunity to really go out and start. And like I say, not be worried about if he has a mediocre game that he's out of the team for a Foden or a Saka. Tell him he's in. Tell him he can relax and go out and do his stuff. And I think England are a better team when he's playing in that starting 11.
Just so people know, you and I both don't like Raheem Sterling for FPL reasons. He's burnt me so many times in the past that it's more of like a long-running joke. Let's move on to the Spanish assets, though. And it's kind of a question of who to go for. Do you go with Ferran Torres, Sarabia, or do you go with both of them? The good thing, as we've stated there, you'll know the Spanish team early. Sarabia himself, looking at his data, in terms of the fan team scoring metric, I think he's probably maybe more favourable than Ferran Torres because he takes 3.46 shots per 90, which is one of the top for midfielders in the tournament. On top of this, he is in the top 7 for players for XGI in the tournament, and this is with limited minutes as well. And if you take out those players that are no longer in the tournament, he's in the top 2, I think only behind his teammate Morata. Torres himself, incredibly frustrating this tournament. You don't know whether he's starting, you don't know what he's, where he's playing. In the first kind of couple of games where Spain struggled to score, he was getting opportunities, but not that often. and they weren't scoring them. He has one of the highest non-penalty XG per shots in the tournament, though. So when he is getting the opportunity, they're really high quality ones. And in the last game against Croatia, he was really important to the side, not just in terms of shots. And this is almost like an addition to his game. Pre-tournament, we analysed him, and basically all his XG, all his data was shots, shots, shots. No real creativity. Well, in the last game, 4 chances created, 2 big, and an XA of 0.91 against Croatia. So maybe he's growing into a role where he's both striker and creator for Spain. My preference, as kind of stated, Sarabia would be my top one. Ferran Torres, maybe he's worth a punt, especially with the fact that we'll get the team sheets early and you could take him out if he's not starting. But it seems that he's even coming off the bench and doing a bit of a job now, and maybe we can believe in him. But he did burn me at the start of the tournament. Will he be getting both of them in? I know that you're very keen on Sarabia.
Yeah, he's at 7.7. Sarabia is in, and he will stay in. And Torres, it will come down to whether he's starting or not. I'm not even contemplating keeping him in the team at 9 million, in the hope that he might come off the bench and score. For me, if he starts, then there's a strong possibility that he will be included, because I think going forward, if the Spanish progress, then Luis Enrique will look to, nail down this starting 11, and Torres could be a key part of this Spanish side going forward. So I'll wait for the team news on that one. If it's a positive, then yeah, I can see me including Ferran Torres, but otherwise at 9 million, and if he isn't, then certainly not.
My question for you is, do you stick with Insigne? He's somebody that I've got in my team. I think that he racks up a lot of shots, but at the same time, as we kind of discussed, this is a Belgium team that are really defensively sound. Or is he the type of player that will cause this aged Belgian defence a lot of problems? Thomas Vermaelen, almost, it seems inexplicably, has been starting there, and people like Insigne are going to cause a real fuss there. They're quick, they're troublesome, they're tricksters, and maybe that aged backline will not be able to deal with that. He has the 3rd most shot creating actions per 90 of any player in the tournament so far, but as stated, this might be a game where defences win out. Is he worth that little bit of premium as well? Because he's not the cheapest midfielder.
You're right. This is one of those cases where I would have to say, if I'm thinking Belgium are going to progress, and it's almost akin to the Czech Republic and the Netherlands, you could look at that Netherlands team and you look at the Depay's and you look at the Genies and you go, look at their XG, look at their threat, look at the goals that they've scored, look what they'll create. Look at how many shots they have. If they get penalties, then great. And almost, you just have to keep your fingers crossed, hide behind the settee, and just hope that maybe your gut feeling is right on this occasion. And if I'm going to take a gamble and take a punt on Belgium, again, with one eye on Italy and high ownership, and Insigne, commanding big numbers, then I'm probably willing to take a punt in going against him, despite the fact that I've been with Insigne since match day 1. So, I'll be going against Insigne and maybe looking to keep him out of the squad.
Interesting tactics, and as always, I wish you the best with it. And
I might need it.
Yeah. Well, you've done well so far, though. I mean, as you said there, you're really high up in the fan team rankings, and it's served well for you. Final kind of discussion points then. Harry Kane. I think if I was going to get him, I'd like it in terms of if England were the starting fixture, so that I would know if Grealish was playing. Because I think if Grealish is playing, then I believe a little bit more in Harry Kane. But without that assurance, Sterling's probably the only attacker from England that I would risk it on. A lot of people are talking about captaining Kane. And I get it. I do get it. It's Ukraine. But look at, they said this about Scotland. And I was kind of hooked into it as well. I thought, that's a great game. He's going to explode onto the scene. He's going to launch his Euro 2020 campaign. But look at the tactics, look at his underlying data. It's not really his tournament. If anything, it's Sterling's, and he's the better own. Immobile, again, it's kind of the fair debate of Italy, Belgium, who you're backing in that. I think Immobile is kind of an interesting own because he does get that large volume of shots, so you'll get those extra points. His 4.62 shots per 90 is only second to Dani Olmo in terms of that, which is quite interesting. Dani Olmo, I don't think a lot of people would have thought that he'd shoot that much. But there is that thing of it's going to be a tight game between Belgium and Italy. I think that Immobile probably can be the one on the score sheet to separate the two, but it's going to be a tight one. It's so close. My backing is obviously as stated with Italy. I'll be really considering that one to the end there because Italy have done the thing where they've shot loads and loads and loads in games, and maybe that's inflated their XG a little bit. I mean, kind of comparing their total team shots to everybody else in the tournament, they're way ahead with 87. The next closest one is Denmark with 75. They've not been kind of sparing. They've not been quality shots. And so you do get that bumper with in terms of people like Insigne and Immobile, but at the same time, they're not scoring all those, but they are overinflated in terms of slightly outperforming their XG. They're a good team. I back them, and Immobile is going to be the one at the centre point. Morata, I just don't trust. He's another one that takes a lot of shots, and he gets a lot of really high quality chances, but he's so poor. The one that I'm going to maybe do a differential dinnery here is Seferovic. I think that against Spain, he's the type of player that will do well against them. And this is why I think it's going to be such a tight game. So in terms of it, before the tournament, really good season with Benfica. His data was ridiculously good. High XG per 90, high XG per shot. But one of his best attacking facets is his aerial prowess. And we've discussed that Spain have kind of struggled in those situations. He can do it again. You know, he might get one goal. He might get a couple against a leaky Spanish defence. He's somebody that I'm really considering in my team, ahead of the likes of probably Kane and somebody like that. And he's a little bit cheaper, so you can spend elsewhere in your squad. The only problem is that he's a one-game punt. And so I don't see Switzerland getting through. And so you might pick up points, but then you've got a transfer that you have to do. And if you've mucked up elsewhere with other kind of things, then that just adds to your worries. So I don't know, is that too risky, Ben?
I mean, I like your thinking, and you know, the form that the Swiss showed against the French shows that they're capable of playing against some of the best teams in the world. So it's not out the realms of possibility that they could progress to the semi-finals. If I was going to go with any Swiss, Seferovic would be the player, but I wouldn't necessarily be looking to maybe do too much of a deep dive into that Swiss team, you know, with one eye on those transfers and trying to keep any hits down to a minimum. I think, like I say, the odd one is okay. You can carry those, you can get rid of the transfers. But if you pick up an injury in suspension, you want to make sure that, you know, any free transfers are not being wasted. So, yeah, like Seferovic. I mean, for me, like I say, I've went down the side of maybe Denmark. I just want to throw another one in there. Poulsen, possibly, if fit. But if not, maybe Dahlberg would be a big of a punt. I'm just thinking, you know, you've got this free-flowing attacking Denmark team. And yes, you look at the opposition that they're coming up against. But, you know, Wales still went out there and done a half-decent job against a few teams in their group. They kept Italy at bay for the large part. And, you know, that Danish team sort of ripped them a new one. So I think, yeah, I like Seferovic, but I think maybe, I don't know, I think maybe I'm looking towards that Danish team. I do like Kane, and I think I'm probably going to take a punt on him, because I think Jack Grealish will start. I think this is his time. I think he's shown enough in the performances that he's had that he can. It's seamless being dropped at that team. He looks comfortable. He's certainly not caught in the headlights. He's well at home. He's a peacock. He's strutting his stuff, and he's a man for the big stage and the big occasion. And I think Gareth should put the trust in him, and his transfer fee will be astronomical by the end of this tournament.
Well, we shall see how that pans out in terms of FPL, because we're not doing any of that content at the moment. We're sticking purely on Fantasy Euro until that is over. Like we said, though, there is a lot of other content on the channel, so make sure to stay subscribed. Do like it, comment on it, just get involved. We love getting involved with the community. And actually, we had Mohammed message us in and saying how well he is doing in terms of Fantasy Euro and Fan Team. He's in the top 100 or top 200? Really, we actually really enjoy seeing that, and makes us happy and glad that we are helping out the community here. But from us today, I hope that is really useful for you with your quarterfinals. Make sure to tune in a little bit later today. We will be doing our team reveals, or maybe tomorrow, depends when the video goes up, but we will be doing that so that you can follow along with who we have. But for now, I'm going to wish you the best of luck going forward. I'm going to hand it over to Ben to sign us out.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Thanks, guys, for following. Hope you enjoyed that. Really good dissecting round 16. Look, and we're bound to have different opinions going forward, and that's just the nature of this tournament. But look, pop your comments, pop your thoughts in the box below. We always read everything, and we try to reply whenever we can. We'll keep our fingers crossed. We wish you the best of luck. And of course, I wish Jason, my on-screen lover, the best of luck. And we will see you for the next video, which will be the team reveal.